Right. Okay. Welcome back to Ffilm Crack Cric. It's Ffilm Crack Cric time with me, Clive Davis, and
you started.
Yeah.
Why not? Perfect.
Wow.
So yes,
you've prepared a gag for us. Thank you. Brilliant.
Thank you.
So yeah, that's Clive up there, who you may know. And I am Nicholas O'Sheagon, or Nick to you, and then we have a special guest. So
yes.
Introduce yourself there, special guest.
Hello, I'm Robin. There we go. From London.
Perfect. Yes, this does feel like the beginning of a crappy 1980s schoolyard joke, like a Welshman, an Irishman, and an Englishman start a video podcast.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, you usually end up getting the shitty end of the stick on those, Nick. So
yeah, that's how that usually works. Yeah. So we made all of the Irish. We made all the Irish jokes, Kerry man jokes in Ireland. So we just chose a smaller location on Ireland and then retold the same joke. So if you live in Kerry, you
got it coming.
Stupid, apparently.
I guess the people in Kerry maybe pick.
Oh, I'm sure there's an area.
Yeah, like a housing estate.
yeah. Oh, good segue there, Clive.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm kind of worried what's going to happen to Nick at the end of this then.
Yeah, it's an extended joke where something terrible happens to the Irish. So what we do here is we talk about films that have maybe been forgotten, left by the side of the road, shivering and cold and unloved for, and aren't on the regular formats.
I can see where you're going.
Left on a mattress.
Yeah.
Slowly decompose.
Exactly.
Neglected. Yeah.
So I cheated a little bit this time because I chose two documentaries, British TV documentaries that you can see. They're online. They're in YouTube and some other places, but they're not available in any proper decent format. There's VHS or DVD or no streaming or anything like that. And then I cheated by popping in a film between them, just because I've always wanted to talk to Robin about this film, but it doesn't fit the format of the video we do. And plus it's a film that could do with a bit more love, I think. So, and it's our fucking show, so we can make the rules up.
Well, it does work anyway, because it's on the Haggerston estate, a lot of it. So
yes, and the makers of it were inspired by the documentary which we're going to talk first, which is actually how I discovered it. Yeah, which is how I discovered this. So yes, so this our first on the bill today is Summer on the Estate, which is right. So I think,
spoiler alert, if you're suffering from depression or in any way struggling with issues of sadness, stay away from this documentary.
You don't know that for sure.
Yeah, no,
I'll cheer you up.
Maybe it'll cheer you. Who knows? I guess. Maybe.
Well, it's not so bad.
There's moments of great levity in this documentary. I feel. But,
all right.
So I think this started life as it was a series. I think. Originally,
six parts, 30 minutes apiece, I believe.
Right, which I've never seen the full thing. No one's ever uploaded the whole thing, I don't think. But then there was this kind of, I guess, compilation version which aired in like 1990, right? I think, something like that. And it's just under 80 minutes, and I guess it's greatest hits of
best of
miserable bits of because when we get to the follow-up one,
there's stuff in there I hadn't seen, obviously.
Yes,
the cockroach stuff,
horrible stuff that wasn't in. So yeah, we're talking about the kind of condensed Summer on the Estate compilation film, and so this is the Kingswold estate in Hackney, right? Which I'm not sure is it part of a slightly larger estate, and then they built Kingswold like onto it.
As far as I was aware, it was I think Kingswold was just quite a big estate on its own, but they mentioned that in the documentary in the
right.
it was one of the. A lot of estates are like that, where they've got the what they call the Neo-Georgian or whatever type thing which is like a brown brick.
Yes, that's the
kind of,
older stuff. I think it's like from the
those are the older
50s,
ones.
Yeah, and then they built some
1930s.
new stuff in the 60s. They built like some new lower rise. I guess it's brutalist architecture stuff, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, sort of. I don't know if they're. Yeah, sometimes they're brutalist, but I think the stuff like Kingshold was just more just miserabilist, if that's a architectural term, rather than brutalist is like has some extra shapes, doesn't it? Some deliberate shapes, some thought to it.
There is an aesthetic, right? That everything's kind of
these Van der Rohe and those folks.
Yeah,
look
everything's on display, right, on the outside, like the pipes and everything.
Well, it's more just that the heart, like well, there's that famous building, but I mean with the pipes on the outside, but there's also there's a famous estate which I would probably call that's brutalist which is featured in the film Tony that you're going to talk about, which is the one with the staircase on one side and the tower on the other.
Oh yeah,
and it kind of, and then there's little walkways between the step, like
right,
and that's really famous. Gets used all the time as a kind of a looker or whatever. And someone I know lived there,
right?
But that wasn't in East London anyway. But
right. So so basically, this documentary film crew hang out in this estate for a summer, and so we get to see things like so asbestos is a problem. The walls. There's squatters. Kind of overall filth and kind of bad security and stuff. And one of our main characters is what's his name, Joe Fay, who I guess is the chairman for the
tenants' residence.
And he goes to seemingly endless kind of committee meetings and with council housing committees and so it is a proper fly on the wall style documentary, and it's a laugh a minute.
Oh yes.
So what are some? I actually think this is a pretty good doc. I think
it's very good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Really good.
I'd like to see the whole 6 episodes. Actually, I'm sure it would be quite immersive. It reminded me a little bit of Frederick Wiseman's stuff.
Yes.
Here we go. Just
this is it. The true, like the actual cinema verite, where you just let the camera roll and
and they don't even intervene. There's like one
when things are going sideways. Yeah.
There's like one you can just hear during some people having a fight. Like the camera just says, "Show a hand," and they're like, "No, it's fine," and then that's it. Right? Otherwise, they just.
Don't worry about me. It'll look great on camera. Fuck. It's really harsh.
So, had either of you watched this before then?
No,
I don't think so.
Robin, you wouldn't know because you may have watched it before and forgot.
Yeah, well, it was apparently the talk of the town, and I don't know whether. Well, I just wanted to ask you anyway. Why did you pick this? How did you come across it, and why did you pick it?
Well, I came across it because of the second film we're going to be talking about, Tony, which I really like.
You came across it reading about Tony.
And apparently the makers of Tony were highly inspired by this Summer on the Estate documentary, and they recommended it, so I checked it out. And I've watched it a few times because I'm a glutton for punishment, but there's something about it. I don't know what it is exactly, but it's. So
you watched the documentary a few times?
Yeah.
It's incredible. Sorry.
You know, when I'm in the mood to relax and I want to levity.
Incredible.
Yeah. So what did you gents make of it? What were some highlights for you? I mean, because it's it doesn't really have a narrative exactly, apart from this Joe Fay guy kind of you know, trying to not have heart attacks, and while it's basically, it's just, yeah, it's an unsurmountable.
Feels like, yeah, he's tilting at windmills. It's like a Don Quixote
Right.
story, right? Although when you actually watch the sequel, there is a redemptive arc in the whole thing. If you watch the one made 5 years later, it's very satisfying. Actually, I think I'm glad that I went and watched the return to Summer on the Estate, because I left feeling more satisfied than I would if I just finished.
You should watch the second one, The Return, if you're going to watch the first one, because otherwise,
it's worth it. So this was the follow-up, a 45-minute follow-up that came out 5 years later, and it is worth it just because there's footage, like we said, that isn't in this compilation version for some reason, and also, yeah, there's a certain amount of, even though, so yeah, he's escaped from this estate and he's gone to live in Blackpool, right, with his wife. Yeah. But it's kind of interesting. He clearly misses that life as well, right? He likes the life of
combative, shouting at people
into things, and because no one comes out. Everyone in the dock, in a way, even the people who seem to be, you know, fighting the good fight, they all kind of have their own agendas, right?
Yeah.
So like the guy, the leader of the squad,
John,
whatever. Yes, he's a bit.
I quite like John.
I like John, but he's also
the ex-Foreign Legion guy.
You can imagine if you got to know him really well, you'd think, I bet he's a dick. Like,
I think he might be the only one that I think I might have met.
Oh, is that right?
Really?
Point. Yeah, but it's all a bit of a blur, but yeah.
But he's not interesting enough. They don't come back to him. He's one of the key people they don't return to. Would have been nice to check it, but I assume he's off somewhere else in England. You know,
yeah, he's probably
stirring up trouble.
So he's opening up. He talks a good game. He's opening up, you know, otherwise unoccupied, you know, things for people who need housing. Yeah, including a couple who have a house, but the rent has become too high for them to pay. But then, noticeably, he does charge them 50 quid.
Yep.
For opening up each room. And there's an interesting slight Rashomon moment. So there's one of the most memorable parts of this, I suppose. So one of the tenants of the OAP housing dies, right? And no one realizes for a few weeks.
Yeah.
And they eventually take the body out of there, but no one bothers to clean up the filth. Including a mattress with a part of his scalp on it, and then this John and his squatter group, they decide, oh, let's go in there, because it's a health hazard, and let's clean it out or whatever. But the thing is, they leave all this biohazard waste basically
in the street where the children are playing.
Yes, and then later on, when some other people are talking about it, someone hits upon the theory. Well, they were probably looking to see if there was anything worth stealing, valuable. And then it was like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. So even they don't come out of it.
Well, no, they I don't think they were looking for something to steal, though. That was a theory that I thought that John, is it John, the TRA? I thought he it was suggested to him. Oh yeah, but I don't think they were. But the main moral kind of inconsistency or whatever you want to call it is to leave sort of incredibly hazardous waste where loads of kids could just see a skull.
It's like
melted into a mattress.
Either way you look at it, it's like the dangers of it's kind of a particularly hazardous waste of hazardous form of virtue signaling in a way. Like, look at us, doing good work, and we just leave that there. It's like that. I mean, I understand it was horrible, but it was probably better in the room rather.
Yeah, it was in the room for a reason. Right. Which was because it was
Like
no one was going in there.
Yeah, it's all morally due. It's all a grey zone,
But the poor blind guy who lives in the very next,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He could have just stumbled onto
Yeah.
the mattress and accidentally rolled around in the skull. It was yeah, it was really bad. And the thing is, you would blur that out nowadays, wouldn't you? On a documentary, they would have blurred
that's grisly.
out.
I was properly disturbed.
Clive, you know, on your off days when you're not watching a documentary, you can just close your eyes.
Yeah.
And picture the skull.
Yeah.
It's a nice thing for you.
So that another character we have is Ian.
Yeah, poor old Ian.
who enjoy hanging out, kind of painting, drinking lager, and listening to Dire Straits.
Yes.
These two are I think that even though this is kind of grim as well, these are the comic relief of.
Okay, this is the Cheech and Chong of of Summer on the Estate. Yeah, that's. I mean, so you know, it is interesting because he is an abused husband, right? And he does talk about that at this time in the 80s. That just wasn't a thing. Nobody would have paid. Would have just assumed, well, why can't you just beat up your wife back? But you know, he does seem to have been properly abused and not being able to.
Well, his wife is clearly a nasty piece of work.
Yeah,
you see a little.
She's quite scary.
Well, she comes into the house and he's been and he's painted something like an eggshell or something.
Nice,
it's nice. It's nice. Yeah, it's decent. It's decent. You know. And then he got, can you do that for me? And he doesn't answer her straight away. He says something else like, oh, it's eggshell or something. He said, I didn't ask you that. I said, and then he avoids it again. And she's like really getting wound up. And then he eventually says like, yeah, I can do it for you. Thank you. That's all I wanted to fucking know. And it's just like, wow, this woman's wound pretty tight.
She's pretty intense.
Yeah.
Right. And she's dumped she's dragged out a divorce proceeding for several years, it sounds like. And then on the day, this I didn't quite get until I watched the follow-up. Then on the very day of the divorce, she shows up with their kid. It goes, well, he's yours now that we're divorced.
Yes.
And this is what sets off his friend in this spiraling drunken rage that seems to just go all over the place.
Who takes it out on the wife first? So she answers the door to him, and he just barges in and grabs her by the hair. And I tell you what,
but then he beats up the friend that he's there to defend, like that. Whole, and it all seemed very real to me, and brought me back to a couple of uncomfortably hairy situations I've been in, different places I've lived where there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on.
Logic as well, right? It's like he's like talking to him and he's just pounding him, and then see now you understand what I do or something like what. It's just this is.
And that was the one part where I was like, the cameraman. Like, did they offer to do anything there, or did they just stand there?
That's what they did. Yeah.
Okay, they do it.
Very little amount. He's like,
they don't offer to help when he's pulling the wife by her hair because they've already seen her. Yeah, well, they've already seen her like getting wound up very easily, so they're like, oh yeah, leave her alone. But it's funny. I tell you what that reminded me of, oddly enough, Nick, was when we were talking about Things.
Yep.
And Barry J. Gillis's daughter kind of walks out and says, you know, and insults his film, and the other friend won't let it
go the entire rest of the commentary track. Yes. And he just keeps more and more enraged
on his behalf. That's what Tom reminded me of.
Okay.
And they were very Things like these two, Ian.
Yep. They were Canadian trailer trash, the equivalent of the inner city estates. But that's the thing. I mean, Clive and I were briefly talking about this in just on Facebook, and I was just like, you know, poverty is poverty, right? And whether you are in tiny small town Ireland, whether you are on a Indigenous reservation here in Canada, where I've lived for a few years, wherever, you know, I lived in a building not unlike this actually for 2 years in Kitchener, Ontario, where every night I came home, the police were at the building, whole lower floor reeked of pot all the time. Sorry? And old people, yeah, it reeked of old people. And it was kind of, it was a mix of like, some of it was rental, but some of it was social housing. And, you know, it was just grim. But it's kind of like wherever you go.
But you say that, you mentioned, you said, you know, poverty or whatever. But the thing is, when I watch this, even though clearly some of the people here are in dire straits, I don't really think of poverty necessarily when I see an estate like this, because it's kind of a mix, right? Like Joe and his wife, for example, and they're not living in poverty. Like they can scrape enough together to move away, for example.
Sure.
And I'm sure there's lots of other residents in the building who wouldn't consider themselves.
They might not be able to scrape enough to move away. Sometimes you can get rehoused.
No, I guess, but what I mean is, I didn't live in an estate like this, but I would have had friends over the years, and I knew, you know, people in school who came from estates, and I don't think they considered themselves necessarily poor. I mean, they wouldn't have considered themselves well off either. But I don't think
nobody does anymore. Like that, they talk about this, how like in England, for example, like there was this era of working class pride, and now nobody will acknowledge that they come from the working classes like that. It's just kind of everyone feels like they're middle class regardless of how they actually live. And
no, but what I mean, I think it's different again. At this time, I think you would have identified as being working class, but you wouldn't have called yourself poor, like.
Right, because it's a negative connotation. Who wants to think of themselves as?
No, but I don't know. I didn't. Apart from obviously, so this, like the squatters don't have any cash, right? But they're kind of. But I'm thinking about the people the kind of more regular residents who are paying for their rent, right? Who are
sure. Yeah. Okay. Right.
I don't think they would identify, like if you'd have said to them, "You're living in poverty," I don't think they'd have had that. And I don't think it's just a matter of pride. I'm not sure if that, at this point, I'm not sure if this counts as, I think poverty looks slightly different to me. I don't know.
Okay, I'll just, the thing about, there's a relativity of poverty as well, isn't there, though? So where I grew up, I grew up on an estate along Victoria Park, which is very near, really very near Kingswold. But so one of my memories of Kingswold is that it had that reputation. So
as being poor,
as being dangerous. Okay. Dangerously poor, really, in a way. So where I grew up, they're more terrace houses, but it's still an estate. But it's a
right.
So relatively, even though a lot of my friends lived in, you know, houses that are, you know, that are Victorian houses and stuff, you know, that they definitely weren't poor. You know, they were middle class. But you know, we had that, you know, our estate was still rough, but it was buttressed from the from the worst of the kind of crime and conflict, you know, that you get just from it, because it's weird that you so we used to kind of dare each other to ride through Kingswold Estate.
All right.
And I think with George, who we're going to talk about in a minute, my friend who's in the film, Tony, I think we finally did it one day. We're like, let's do it. But we were so terrified of Kingswold, we only rode through like the corner of the bottom of it really fast. So that's the reputation it had. It was, you know, pretty big deal.
That's interesting. I stand corrected, and I think, I understand what you're saying. It's like there would be a whole bunch of other estates that would look the same on the outside, but wouldn't necessarily be so rotten on the inside.
Yeah, Haggerston, which is another one, you know, is worth mentioning, also had that reputation. And the thing is that a lot, you know, within an estate as well, you'll get relativity in terms of how. But the point is, you know, I always kind of find it funny how, because this argument always throughout, from the sort of early, you know, 70s, late 60s, all the way through to now, is always like, wow, they brought it upon themselves, sort of thing. Actually, from the Victorian age, isn't it? Really, you know, they brought it. They're a certain type of person that ends up in that situation, and that self-perpetuating argument, and but then I always sort of marvel at how sort of middle class people, you know, I'm a parent now and on WhatsApp groups with other parents, you know, through no fault of my own, and you know, they get fucking incredibly upset about, like, you know, tiny things like, you know, oh, you know, Petunia doesn't know the maths homework, and, you know, the big fucking, oh, well, we need to get onto the school about this. It's 15, 30 bloody messages down, and it's like, and just talk about the Tenants Residents Association, you know, and how much conflict there was in that. Well, those conflicts are in any group of people that are trying to kind of do something, but the when you throw in drug addicts, and you know, and if you throw one drug addict into my, you know, the sort of post-war estate that's everyone's a homeowner that I live on now, just one, that person would be fucking completely notorious, and everybody would be talking about them all the fucking time. We wouldn't shut up about that drug addict ever. And these estates have, you know, many and the more you have, and Kingshold had most of them. And furthermore, I went to Lauriston School, and a lot of the middle class kids, and it was the good school. Kingshold, I meant to check this before I went, but Kingshold had its own school as well, you know, so it's sort of got this, you know,
the asbestos school.
It's a school of asbestos and crime. It's got its own cordoned off school catchment area
for young psychopaths on the rise.
But it's okay, so I was just going to say, you know, so we left Ireland for a reason. We left Ireland in 1989 because, you know, my hometown, Wicklow, basically the only real employer was this big radiator factory down by the seaside, and there was a strike and it closed down, and so it turfed like 70% of the men on the dole, right? And so and around the same time they were building. So I mean, you know, council estates are slightly different than housing estates. I mean, they're all housing estates, but you know what I mean? Like, so my parents owned their home and paid a mortgage. We lived on an estate, but the estates on either side of us were council estates. And I can remember being a kid, and you know, we had quite a lot of traveling folk as well. There was travelers who kind of lived up in the roads behind, and some of them had been moved into council houses, and there was all of this kind of decrying of that again by what passed for middle class people. Really, Wicklow didn't have a burgeoning middle class. It was mostly kind of working class people. But you know, I can remember like people saying stuff like, "Oh, they're just going to fill the bathtubs full of coal and chop up the banisters and burn them for firewood and stuff," and me being an impressionable child, I'd be like, "Oh yes, like that sounds reasonable. I'm sure that these, you know, these traveling people will do that." And years later, living in Canada, I read The Road to Wigan Pier by George Orwell, and that's described exactly in that book, and is written in whatever the 1930s. And and it was about basically just working people in where is Wigan anyway?
Wigan is it's up north.
Manchester, is it?
It's that way, yeah. It's around on the coast. Yeah.
But basically, yeah, they were, you know, like this is, and then I was like, oh, this isn't really true. This is just something that this is a story people tell so that we can have an excuse for why those people shouldn't be in houses, why they shouldn't be allowed to have nice things, because they'll wreck them.
It's even more than that. I think it becomes a self-fulfilling thing as well, like and people do start behaving like that as well because they're told that's how they'll behave, and then some people react to that by behaving like it, and then it's like,
oh yeah,
see.
I mean, Ireland as well. Ireland in the 80s, right, 70s and 80s when I was growing up, wasn't that long out of colonial times, right? We had, you know, and so that mindset of like, let's wreck everything. Like I can remember, like you'd go to like a, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
like you go to a public toilet and it's disgusting. It's smashed. There's feces on the walls. You go to try to use a phone and it's been smashed to pieces and all the pages are torn out. And it's like, well, you know, this is ours now. Why are we still wrecking everything? But it was this kind of like mentality that takes generations, I guess. And to some degree, you know, you'll see some of that in Indigenous communities as well, where colonization is still a thing. Like here in Canada, this is a colonized nation, right? Our Indigenous people have been shunted to the side and kind of forced to live on the least, you know, decent land. And yeah, there's a lot of anger, legitimate anger there. And you see some of these things of like, where houses aren't always, I mean, again, case by case, person by person. But sometimes you'll see some of that same despair, I guess, acted out against property or whatever. But what I was just saying is I also remember the scary estates in Wicklow. And Wicklow is idyllic, countryside, rolling green pastures, little sheep, you know, out on the hills. But a kid in my class.
You've made a mistake there, the classic Father Ted Dougal mistake.
Oh, yes.
They're not little sheep, they're far away.
Far away. Thank you, Clive. Yes. So yeah, but this kid in my class, Noel, lived on one of these scarier, sketchier estates and was taken out when we were in maybe fourth class or fifth class by a bunch of older boys from the kind of maybe first year, second year, and they poured battery acid on his head. And he, you know, I mean, he will always have a big bald patch and a horrible scar on the top of his head. And that scared the shit out of me as a kid. Like that there was a possibility that if you went to the wrong estate, a bunch of older kids might decide to do something to you that you were going to...
you in a fridge on a dump.
Yeah, an old wrecked car. I mean, there's old wrecked cars all over the place in Ireland, right? You know, and yeah, just get locked in a trunk somewhere. Yeah, no, it was a really a constant fear growing up in what seems like a fairly nice place from the outside, but there was estates can be scary.
Well, I mean, just talking about, because I mean they focused on the guy dying on, you know, on his bed.
Yeah.
But to me, the second one was kind of more indicative of like, again, if you had this problem thrown into a kind of polite middle class area, no one would be. But the cockroaches. Am I giving up way too much if I talk about that?
No, go for it.
No, I think it's worth it. It's all part of the same, I think. Okay. Yeah.
Just because she you know, it was heartbreaking, wasn't it? She really, I was so upset.
Driven insane by a cockroach.
Literally insane, and you could completely understand her. She has short hair, and you know that scene where she's showing the video, and it was so well done, showing the video of her and her husband, you know, having a lovely time in this was the time we were the happiest we'd ever been there. And they're in America. They get back from America, and it was literally they just got back, hadn't they? Because she was wearing her culottes and like you know, kind of cream or beige, you know, thing, and a bum bag and stuff. Like literally just back from holiday, and the house is the flat is crawling with cockroaches everywhere, and they're so creeped out by it.
There's so many of them as well.
It's that's absolutely like nightmare fuel and horror movie. Like it seems like something that would be set up.
I don't think but like she said, she snaps when she wakes up and she's covered in cockroaches. I'm thinking, I don't think I could actually go to sleep.
No.
Like,
but so I guess this is my question, Clive. This is my question, Clive. Why would you stay if you weren't in a situation where you had no other choice? Like, that's where poverty reduces your choices in such a way that you end up staying in a place.
No, I wasn't saying that there weren't people in that. I was just saying that it's, well, like to your point as well, that it is relative, and I'm not sure if it's exactly because, for example, obviously their room as well has a cockroach infestation. So do the neighboring rooms also? Is there no one in them, or
Yeah,
like,
no, I think it was in the tower block, so it was like
right?
it
So
that
that's
was
the
just
other
happened
thing.
to be the worst, and it could be a number of factors to do with that, but
Because
I mean, what?
it's teeming. It's not like they're not even hidden, right? They're just walking around the whole time, and you do have to
Yeah,
wonder.
but I mean, might have just been that several of the other flats that were had really bad infestations were either semi-empty or with junkies and stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, they
wouldn't
largely
display.
stayed away from the junkies anyway. Like,
Right,
they
I
didn't
noticed.
really
Yeah,
interview any of them or like stuff like that. So they didn't really, unless of course the longer part, they didn't really do a deep dive into like a Cabrini Green,
The drugs.
right.
talk about the Candyman and go around looking at that particular flat.
Yeah,
I have a quick question though.
Yes.
Just did you? I don't know whether it's sort of prejudice of me or not, but did you think that Ian's son was his son, or did you get the feeling that maybe he wasn't?
Oh yeah, he did look fairly Italian or Spanish for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
He doesn't really look like you, Ian.
But I'm shocked we've been talking about all this grim stuff. We haven't talked so much about any of the classic comedy moments. So because some of the committee meetings are just great. Some of my favorite moments are there's one random guy, the black guy in like the camouflage jacket, who just talks nonsense the whole time, and people just get. He's great. He just sat there, and they're making a point or whatever, and he's like leaning over. Yeah. But tomorrow never comes, and and he's saying all
he's
these
clearly
things.
struggling with some kind of mental.
And then after a while, the woman just like, I haven't got time to listen to your shit. I thought that was great.
But then he shows up later at the house trying to kick her door in because he's clearly a hump about the whole thing. And then that takes a slightly scary turn. It shows you again being surrounded by this level of grinding poverty that drives people mad.
And the other bit of comedy gold as well is when it might be that same woman who shouts at him actually is talking about a lack of things for the kids to do.
Oh, yeah, the park.
And they said, why don't you go send it down the park? And she says, I'm not sending my kids down the park with all the fucking nonsense. I'd be rolling in my chair. So there's a few, dialogue you can't write. It's so
right. But that's a nice piece of connective tissue to Tony, actually, in a way. I wonder if that's one of the things that they were thinking of.
One last thing on Somewhere in the Set that for me, I mean, I do quite like the jazzy trumpet music.
Yeah,
it's quite nice. By Willem Wolf, I thought that was quite nice and soulful.
Yeah, it's also shot very well. It definitely gives you that enclosed feeling of like you're trapped in this concrete jungle, And
I suppose we should mention before we get on to Tony as well, the other thing about the follow-up film is like they do eventually
blow the fucking thing up, which is great.
Yeah.
It's very satisfying.
I went and saw that.
What?
Oh, right.
Live?
Yeah. Well, yes. So because I spoke to my mum today about that. I've got two memories of King's Hold, more memories. One of them is extremely depressing, but because I was in Wales when they blew it up, but my mum obviously still lived down there, and I don't know, it was pretty famous and around the area, and when they were blowing up, it was a big deal. They were going on about it a lot. So I must have been on holiday or whatever, visiting my mum. And
well, you would. I mean,
my mum went. Got to go.
Even if it wasn't a notorious estate, like if they were going to blow up a tower building anywhere near me, I'd go.
I'd be there.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
The main reason I went was because I'd seen one be blown up in, I think, Bow. I got a really good view of that. And it was, I thought, all right, if I ever get a chance, I'm going to go and see it.
I did wonder, though, when the enormous cloud of like dust just kind of billowed, I was like, hang on, aren't those buildings full of asbestos? And all the people with no masks are just standing around as this like cloud of several estates around it. I was like,
no, well, but where it was sort of near well, I always call it Maynell Crescent, but it was somewhere around there. They'd put, I think, like green, walls around to, and yeah, I didn't get a very good view of the tower blocks coming down, but I did get plenty of asbestos dust. So,
yeah, it was like the asbestos's last hurrah, right? Like we'll
yeah.
get a few more lungs before you get rid of us.
Yeah.
But
I will say too, I
fascinating
didn't
that
catch
controlled demolition in an urban environment. That whole
it's
concept
cool.
is, yeah.
And after having watched the first documentary, very satisfying. But I didn't realize, I didn't catch Joe's slight Irish lilt for some strange reason in the first documentary. But when they came back to him, I was like, oh, hang on. And then he starts talking about that he's part, the O'Flaherty's from, West Ireland. I was like, now I know why he's so angry.
The fighting O'Flaherty's.
He's just one of those Irishmen who go place and
that's what he does.
Trouble.
That's fascinating, because that's a thing we don't get into. Is clearly he's a man with rage issues. Right? Like on the one hand, I understand it's infuriating if you were like trying to deal with those committees, but he does have clearly as a shot.
Oh yeah.
What's the word?
At least he's directed his rage somewhere where it's likely to do some good. And you get more actually when they come back to it. You get a bit more. I mean, because the poll tax, there's that whole thing about whether they want to have the poll tax, the anti-poll tax meeting, right? And there's kind of a big kerfuffle about that.
That's the first thing you see in the film is no to poll tax.
Yeah, and so there is this other context, right, of England at the time and Thatcher and the whole Tory mess, right? And you kind of, and then Heseltine shows up in the sequel, right?
Yeah.
And so that I was kind of glad they kind of delved a little bit more into that whole, this was kind of the end in a way. This was the beginning of New Labour kind of comes up around this time, right? Not that they turned out to be great either, but
it's interesting as well because, like you were saying about people, whether they consider themselves either working class or not, or regardless of their actual position. Joe, as well, strikes me as one of those guys because I remember the whole poll tax riot era, and even though that would have certainly affected him.
Clive, you subscribed to Class War newspaper at the time, I believe,
yes,
right?
And socialist worker, and I remember that's how they pronounce regardless of where you were in the country, whenever you saw someone selling socialist worker, they must have sent them to socialist worker pronunciation school. They all socialist worker.
I'm sure it's a gulag somewhere up north.
Anyway, but even though it would have affected, Joe strikes me very much as someone who wouldn't be seen dead on a poll tax march.
Yes, yeah.
Like he would have, we've got to suck it up type.
Conservative in a way, but then at the same time,
exactly.
He does have nothing good to say about the Tories later on, right? In the second, when you get back to it, you see that he does have some angle. But then the other thing, as I was looking into Hackney and the kind of the surrounds, I noticed that Stoke Newington is in this area as well, right? And about the Angry Brigade, the Stoke Newington 8?
No.
No.
This is history well worth reading. This is England's Baader Meinhof.
Okay.
Anarchist, terrorist, except that unlike the Baader Meinhof, they didn't kill a bunch of innocent people. So yeah, this is great history. And so this the Christie file. Stuart Christie was a Scottish anarchist who was part of the Stoke Newington 8, and he went off to Spain to try to assassinate Franco in the late 60s, I think, and then got caught because he was wearing a kilt trying to cross the border to kill Franco, which was, but yeah, anyway.
Really blended in.
Yeah, but there is this, there's this amazing history, and there's actually a pretty good documentary about that period, the Angry Brigade, all the bombings and stuff that they were involved in and attempting to kind of foment revolution in England, which might be something else because I don't think it's been released, but you can find it on streaming and stuff. So, but yeah, it seems like it does seem like that Hackney.
Robin back on to talk about.
Yeah, the surrounds does seem to have had this kind of quite radical in the early 70s, early 70s, quite a radical. Well, this is like full on anarchist revolutionary stuff.
Well, the kind of anarchist bookshop in Whitechapel I don't know if it's one of the oldest
Yes, yeah.
Just bookshops or something.
Freedom Press has run out of there.
Yeah.
I went and visited there in my early 20s when I was more of a proper, proper anarchist.
Jack the Ripper used to buy his
That's how old it
socialist
is.
worker outside there.
He used to sell socialist worker. Socialist worker.
driven
No,
mad
thanks.
by There we go. We've got another new thread to the Jack the Ripper conspiracy thing.
Yes.
Actually, a socialist worker salesman.
Yeah. Well,
But anyway, yeah, great documentary. I think both of them actually. I think they should be watched as a diptych. You should watch both of them back to back if you're going to watch
Would
them.
you
both
call me?
available on YouTube. Huh?
Would you fucking call me?
Diptych. You call him a fucking diptych.
Fucking come over here, call me that. Bag.
So, Clive, do you want to introduce us to Tony?
Yeah, so Tony.
You know what? Actually, I have to say, what I liked about both of these was they both clocked in at about an hour and 15 minutes, and that I love a movie that's not even 90 minutes. I like a 75-minute movie is, I think, the ideal length for a film.
Agreed. Brevity is always good, I think. So, unlike our podcasts and YouTube videos,
yes, which go on for 9 hours.
Total hypocrites.
Also, for day release, we're going to be doing a 3-hour fucking film.
Oh yeah, 2 3-hour films. In fact.
Oh, shit. 2.
Yeah, if he doesn't get me fired for something that we talk about on one of these shows, he'll just get fired from not being able to do any of my job. Like I haven't done report cards. I'm way behind because instead I'm endlessly reading books and watching films for the 19 different things Clive has me doing. Anyway, Tony.
Yes,
let's talk about Tony.
So from 2009, based on an earlier short that they'd made as well, which I did see back in the day, I remember, but it's not. I don't think you need to see like all. I think they transposed all the good stuff into this.
Okay.
Directed and written by Gerard Johnson, who is the brother of Matt Johnson, who is
From
basically
the
who did the music for this film.
Yeah, great soundtrack.
Gerard Johnson as well, very much inspired, and I guess I think his brother as well were very inspired by the Summer on the Estate documentary when they made this. Starring who I think is one of those great British national treasures that not enough people know about, Peter Ferdinando.
Yep,
who's really good.
This is my first time I've ever seen him, but I was mesmerized.
You may have seen him because he turns up in other films as well. As I think he's in some of Ben Wheatley's stuff, and he always looks totally different. Like he has quite
that Gary Oldman syndrome of
he has a real
disappearing into a role.
Well, in a less Gary Oldman disappears into a role and then shouts about it.
In an ostentatious way.
Yeah, this is a much more subtle chameleon way.
I think George said, but I spoke to him ages ago. I think he said he was kind of method.
I can see.
Oh God.
Yeah.
And he's his cousin as well, is he not?
Huh?
I was reading about, but is that our star is also the director's cousin?
Yes, there's a connection there, I think. Yes.
Yeah, there's a family. Yeah.
So we should mention here before we continue. So you've mentioned George a few times. This is your mate George Russo, right?
Yep.
Who is in this film as one of the junkies, right?
Yep. Yeah, Mackie and his mate Smudgy, who is played by Francis, who's George's cousin.
Ah, right. Okay.
Yeah, they did some short films together and stuff like that. So Peter Ferdinando plays Tony, who's kind of like, I suppose the inspiration is he's like Dennis Nielsen.
That's Scottish. Yeah, I didn't know actually until reading about the movie. I didn't know about that.
Yeah,
and that happened just after my time. I think that would have been in the news. So I wasn't aware that there was
Dennis Nielsen was the Killing for Company guy who murdered a few people and then propped their corpses around his flat and like spoke to them and kept them for company.
Like an Ed Gein a Scottish Ed Gein kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Um,
So he
but I
was
have to
kind
say
of the template for
that Tony looks like Robert Crumb and Ron Mayle had a child.
He does look
like,
very
just
Robert
like,
Crumb.
like just to mash those two people together and then.
So yeah, so he's been on unemployment for something like 20 years or something, right? And he's wandering around Hackney, Dalston kind of area, right? And just
his character is established so well in that first scene where he attempts to have a conversation with the Asian DVD sales guy on the street. That is just brilliant cinema. Like,
what do you think? What do you think is better, karate or kung fu? This is just great stuff. I quote that all the time. That's just such a good, because it sums him up, right? Like everything about him is, what do you think's better, karate or kung fu? Because you're not sure. Is he just asking because he's Asian, or would he just ask anyone because he's obsessed with action films, right? Like
and he's very lonely. So there's this like he's seeking human contact, but he only has this very limited set of references he can use that most people are going to be like.
It also seems to be like trying to understand the world as well.
Yeah,
in a way.
Yes. And then I love that he has this enormous collection of VHS cassettes. Because at the beginning I thought, oh, this is set in the 80s or something, and I realized quickly, no, it's not. He's just really committed to the format.
I think what's interesting about this as well is it plays with so when me and you, Robin, before we were talking about the film, the more recent film Censor, which was a parody of the whole video nasty era and had a serial killer sent in. What I liked about this as well was, in a way, the Tony character was kind of like, it's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek kind of, see, this is what people who watch those action videos, the video nasties they will turn into, it's clearly making a nonsense of it, but in a way that's so much more effective than the entire film Censor was. Like, it's just one element of this film that I think is maybe even on a slightly subconscious level. I'm not sure if they would have thought that's what they were doing necessarily, but it's clearly in the mix. It's like a cheeky little kind of nod to, let's imagine if all that shit they said about video nasties was true.
The hysteria was true.
Yeah, kind of thing. So I think there's that side to it as well, a little bit.
Yeah. Because he constantly quotes, it's action films mainly though, isn't it?
Yeah. Especially
quotes action films.
Lots of first blood.
To psych himself up to carry out these actions.
There's like one, I guess it's his nemesis. There's a neighbor whose child's gone missing. But the first time, and it's interesting again, because I don't think this film is, don't get me wrong, I don't think this film is a classic by any means, but it's really well observed, I think. And the character, so there's this kind of, there's a this fat guy who's really that type of guy who has extremely loud arguments with his wife in public in the pub, and like, so everyone can see and hear it, and then gets angry when you notice, like that type of guy. I'm making a huge noise, and then, were you fucking eyeballing me? What the fuck? Like that kind of person, I've always considered like the scariest type of people, because they're so unreasonable, right? Like,
right. Although Tony really is, because there's this feeling that it's just all entertainment for him. Like he's almost watching it like it's an episode of Jerry Springer, or he's kind of just like goggle-eyed at this like actual action that's happening, and doesn't get that.
What I liked about that character as well, though, is it's not just a caricature, because yes, he's again in the way that everyone's kind of grey in some run, their way. Like, so, like, yes, he's a character, and unless he's scary and all that, and he's an obnoxious kind of fella, but he does have a kind of sixth sense. He knows there's something wrong with Tony. Like, it turns out, spoilers, in the end, he didn't actually kidnap that kid. That's one of the crimes he hasn't committed.
Yes, it has a bit of Taxi Driver ending.
Yeah, but he fucking knows, right? Like, he senses, like, he
Something's
senses
wrong.
there's something wrong with him. Right? And yeah, to your point, Robin, like he's like, there's one great scene where he's having a go at him in the street, and he mutters something, doesn't he? Like, "Oh, you better not say that to me, or bring your A game here," or something. What? Yeah, he's in his face, and it's just
Throws him in the bin.
yeah. That's just horrible and hilarious at the same time.
Yeah. Kind of looking behind it.
And you know, it's funny that fall song, like Carry Bag Man or Carrier Bag Man, really kept coming back to me. Like,
The fall song.
Yes,
Right.
yeah. It's like every time we see him, we'll go walking, and then of course at a certain point you realize what you don't know at the beginning of what's in those bags, and then when you do, it's just very dark.
Another thing that's really funny as well is when he takes your mate Mackie and Squidgy or Spudgy, what's his name?
Smudgy.
Yeah.
Smudgy.
When they go back to his flat after they've scored some drugs, and like the whole he has no clue about drug etiquette, right?
Yeah.
Like trying to snatch the foil off him where he's
Give me some.
Yeah. I
They're
love
constantly shoving the glasses in people's faces. But not just him. He does it. He carries it on and does it. With
it's there's
the TV license guy or whoever it is, or the chief of staff. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Goes, one drink.
Yeah.
Not a squash.
Squash.
John, squash. Yeah. John, beans on toast. I can make beans on toast. Yeah.
And you know, you couldn't, because it comes up over and over again, but you could just like that room, like the smell of that room, it's almost palpable somehow. You just you get you know that's there's a very specific smell to meat if you leave it too long, like even just the plastic wrap in your bin a couple of days, and you imagine that cloying rot stink in this place.
Yeah. I got that more from the thing we're going to talk about next, the biker documentary. I was getting really full on ASMR, overwhelming. But
also in this film is Neil Maskell as well, who's also a Ben Wheatley regular. He plays the guy in the job centre, and that's another extremely well observed little bit, right, where he's kind of quite rude to talking and checking his phone and stuff, and just that's a nice little bit. The fat guy,
the guy in the tanning booth place as well is great.
The music in the background. It's horrible.
I should mention as well that the fat neighbor guy who's onto him that's Ricky Grover, isn't it? I think.
He's got his own. He's had a few. He's got a series called I can't remember it.
I'll look
King
out
or something. Yeah, look out for the King, something like that.
Okay. But yeah, no, it's just such a nicely well observed piece, I think, all around. And then yes, I mean he doesn't get caught in the end, right? He just kind of seems to. I don't know how long he can get away doing what he does with that stench in his room. But
that is what gave away the person it's based on, right? That was. I think it was like he did clog the drains of his building.
Yes, in the same way as I think that's what happened to the clown guy. John Wayne Gacy.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was the drains again.
What clown guy?
John Wayne Gacy, the serial killer who dressed as a clown at kids' parties.
Oh,
smashing together all your.
Who I've played in a reconstruction drama.
Of course you have, Clive. But you know, there's a couple of that first murder, because again, if you don't know what's coming, and I didn't realize, because I hadn't seen, because I quite like the fact that the version we watched doesn't have that like a serial killer story, whatever the hell ridiculous thing they add to it when they released it on DVD.
I think that's just I don't think that's ever been part of the, because I like the credits. It just comes a pony. It's just, you know, it's very,
and then again at the end, which is wonderful that it comes. It's like it kind of brackets the movie because they put it up again at the very end.
Yeah.
I didn't notice they put it up at the beginning. I thought it was just sort of like
I think it comes
a film in reverse in a way, like. And now the story begins, you know,
right.
like
and it's in that font as well, isn't it? It's in that
it's just like Oh yeah, he kind of, because it's almost he's you're thinking, is there going to be an antagonist, or is there going to be and he's not a kind of, you're not ever, I don't really think, you're never really rooting for him.
No, yeah, it does interesting things with your identification, because you neither like him nor really hate him.
Yeah, well,
strangely.
when he's sent out, when the job center guy, and then he goes to the tanning salon, and he's sent out having to carry that, well, not a sandwich board, but that, the sandwich board. You kind of feel kind of sorry for him, right, a little bit, because you're like, oh,
it's almost like a Charles Bukowski.
Yeah, I bet he's not
story
enjoying that. Like, just leave him alone. Like,
but that's sort of what I was saying was getting at. I mean, is that I was never rooting for him until the very end. And then I was like, yeah, go on, mate, you got away with it.
It's quite beautiful.
I went away quite satisfied.
And I do think, like if we're going to talk about, again, that summer on the estate, like the way that everything just feels like compressed and closed in, a lot of the movie does have that feeling. And then at the very end, it all opens up when you see the London Eye and this kind of like vista. Right. And it's quite liberating in a way, because so much of the movie is cramped and confined.
It was shot in kind of funny. I mean, yeah, there was some, because it was kind of all over the place. But I thought he lived on Haggerston Estate, which again, that was a estate on the canal. That was another notorious one. Okay. Which now is like prime real estate. Right. He lived on the first floor. Right?
When you look out his window, you can see some trees and stuff. I think he's on the first floor, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you see I'm getting confused.
I feel like they might come upstairs. Space.
Yeah, and there's some odd scenes where he's walking around and you can see the Gherkin in the background. You're thinking you probably
suddenly they're in King's Cross as well, but you can walk along Regent's Canal from. So there was some consistency in the sense that Haggerston is near Dalston. He starts off in Dalston, and then you can walk Regent's Canal down to.
That's another nice. That's another nice line as well, when they first hook up with Mackie and Spudgy, and they're like, "Where are you from, mate? Where are you from?" I'm from Dalston, and he says something like, "Ah, it's fucking meant to be." Like,
yeah. Oh yeah, so here's the thing. Here's the thing that I took away from this for a future Ffilm Crack Cric. At one point, he's talking up a movie called Enemy Territory.
Oh yes,
starring Jan Michael Vincent, and it turns out Ray Parker Jr., who wrote the score to Ghostbusters,
which I've seen,
and somebody else is in that too that you don't expect. It's an interesting bunch of people.
Yes.
But it's never been released on DVD.
No, it's directed by Tim Kincaid as well, I think, if I remember. Who's the guy who made like Breeders, if you remember.
Okay, anyway, it's apparently there's no intention. It's not available streaming anywhere like that. Legitimate.
It's also one of the films. So Jan Michael Vincent was at the height of his alcohol and coke stupor. So his character just spends the entire film in a wheelchair. He's a wheelchair-bound character, because apparently he just couldn't stand.
Couldn't do anything else. Wow. Yeah,
so they just put him.
So maybe
yeah,
we can make a Tony connection there. We'll the movies that Tony recommends.
Tony's got
Tony film night.
Yeah, I was trying to look actually on his roll.
Yeah, what's on there? What's on his shelf? Me too. I was like,
the only one I could notice was I think that Mickey Rourke film Johnny Dangerously. I think was one of them.
Oh,
the only one I kind of spotted. Yeah. So, what else is there to say about this film? I mean, it's.
I loved it.
Did you both enjoy it?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. It is a bit of a gem, I think.
I thought I didn't know where it was going. I deliberately hadn't read anything about it or anything, and but it delivered in a really nice way. I thought,
Yeah.
I know that the director was complained that it gets compared to Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer quite often. He says he feels that that's a lazy comparison, but he himself said he sees it as being more akin to Man Bites Dog. that French.
Belgian.
Yeah, Belgian. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah,
the Belgian
yeah.
cinema verite.
Yes, that's true. That would be an interesting a double bill. So Jerry Johnson and Peter Ferdinando did go on to do another film called Hyena as well, which, if we're doing comparisons, I suppose would be the UK Bad Lieutenant, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Which I remember kind of being quite interesting as well. And yes, more recently, he's made this film, Muscle, with Craig Fairbrass, which has been getting some quite good reviews as well. I have yet to see that. So, so anything more to say about Tony, gents?
Only just about Haggerston Estate and how, it was all boarded up and stuff. I just wanted to say this quick thing about that documentary I was talking to you about before this.
Go ahead.
Which is called Estate, a Reverie.
Mm-hmm.
So it was interesting because that estate, again, it actually was called the crime. It was dubbed by a journalist the crime capital of London or something like that, or the UK even. What happened was that they were going to knock it down just like Kingshold, and and rehouse everyone, but they didn't do that for about 20 years, and they passed over the ownership of the estate to L&Q Housing, who then were held on to the estate, and then were going to then they just independent company just let everybody do what they want on the estate, because they were going to knock it down anyway. So a kind of, just to further to what we were saying earlier, a community evolved out of that, with squatters but also with tenants and stuff, where they could do what they want, and they started painting the whole place and putting up murals and stuff, and all those orange boards that were where the windows were boarded up. They got giant photos of themselves printed out to fit those boards, and put them where they lived. So they kind of plastered every orange board with a huge portrait of each person who lived there.
Can you do one for me?
Huh?
Can you do one for me?
It's made out of linoleum.
I didn't ask what it was made of.
Well, it will look really nice if you just if you have it right on the canal.
I didn't say that.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
Jesus.
Very nice, gents.
And scene. Yeah, anyway, that's a really nice documentary to watch in terms of what can happen when people because one of the things I was thinking, which we didn't get to before, just was, why is it that now a lot of those, especially those Georgian estates, they got taken over completely by right to buy, and then those then got sold on for so you buy it for whatever, 16 grand for right to buy in the 80s, something stupid like that, and then it would then get sold on again for 150 grand, and then now they're being sold on for 500, 600 grand. But so they turn into middle class estates now, where you don't get the high level of crime and stuff. I just wonder, one of the things we didn't talk about was the aspect of control, which runs through all of this, and in a way, like Tony is, his thing is sort of about gaining control over his life, and the documentary, Somewhere on the Estate, is also about people trying to gain purchase over their lives, and control, and that aspect. I wonder if that was something that they thought about in in Tony, where it's like where the effect of not being able to have control over your life or not be able to have a say in your life, and it was so it was very. I would recommend if you want a palate cleanser after the depression of to watch Estate of Reverie, because it's about people on an estate having control over their lives for once, for just this lovely free moment of having no restrictions,
self-determination.
no fucking. Because what happened was, I'll just quickly got it. What happened was, they had, it's similar to the King's Hall estate. They got rid of the warden and stuff. The whole place started turning to shit. Because obviously the warden is the person who goes around and looks at what's wrong, and then then the council's the estate got this really bad rap from the journalists and stuff, and then the council decided, all right, they're gonna just go around and put fucking no ball games and all these stupid posters up, don't do it, and then they just gave up on the place. And then when they gave up on the place, that's when people started to decorate it and
direct action, right? I mean, that's what it is. It's direct action when you just
furthermore
do it yourself.
As the hipsters are all moving in at that particular time in this is in 2014ish or 2010, a long period anyway. And in that documentary, you could see them. They're doing tours, hipster tours around the estate, and the people are standing on the balcony going, "I bet they think we're fucking chimney sweeps, don't they?"
Little property tourism.
Yeah. And there's this horrible bit as well. It's hilarious, but where one of the hipsters goes, "Oh, can I take a photo of you?" It's like. It's this Jamaican guy. He's like,
"Keep holidays in other people's misery." But it's true that there's a whole thing as well about how Alexis Hale used to do this thing a bit as well about like how like reliant people living in council housing get on, my toilet seat's broken, but the council didn't come around to fix it. My trousers are falling down.
It's like learned helplessness, right? That comes from always having to ask permission for everything. But there's actually this. We're about to run out of time here, I think, in a second. But I have a book that Alexis Hale did with I think his name is Oscar Zarate or something like that. He's a comic artist, illustrator guy, and he and Alexis Hale did a couple of comics.
Yes,
a couple of graphic novels together. And there's one where he begins on this like horrific estate with these big tower blocks, and he has this whole theory that like the people designing these things are trying to hasten the total downfall of like civilization, that they're secret anarchists who are bent on, because you would never design a place that dysfunctional unless you wanted chaos, lucky, as I said, I mean, I feel privileged not to have grown up in a place as lacking in hope. But then it's nice to see what you were saying, that obviously people were able to go into those places and make a proper home of them, make proper communities out of the shit that they were given once they had the power to do it.
Well, also as well, I mean, like those roaches as well, in a way, there's always, in almost any situation, there's always, it's teeming with life somewhere, right?
Life finds a way. Yes.
Someone's getting something out of it, right? I mean, it's like the whole David Cronenberg thing as well, isn't it? Is that you're looking at cancer or the diseases from the wrong point of view, like from the disease's point of view, like they are flourishing, anyway, right.
I would, sorry, just one last thing before we run out of time. I would pay unbelievable amounts of money to be able to be in that meeting where the woman from the council estate got the bread bin full of cockroaches and threw it into the council meeting. That would have been the most wonderful.
I would have been satisfying, I think. Yes. So yes, away from the estates of Hackney, getting our motor running, heading down the highway. Looking for adventure.
Or whatever Yeah.
Whatever comes our way.
Comes our way, yeah. I had a question
Right.
about how did we get from there to here? Because as I was watching these, I was like, okay, I can see the connective tissue here to here. Why am I in East Anglia?
Because initially this would have just been somewhere on the estate and the Outcast. It would have just been two oddball kind of forgotten documentaries.
Okay.
But then, because I really wanted to talk about Tony with particularly with Robin, but with both of you, and I'm glad we did, because I thought we were going to chat out of it. Yeah, so there's no connection.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I was mystified.
And so I want to talk. So the reason I even know about this, credit where credit is due. There's there used to, so the late Sean Locke, comedian Sean Locke, he used to have a very short-lived TV series called TV Heaven, Telly Hell. I think it was only on for a couple of seasons, and they'd have celebrity guests on, and they'd talk about things that they loved on television, things that they hated on television. And oddly enough, of all the guests, Johnny Vaughan, you probably don't remember who Johnny Vaughan is, Nick, but you remember Johnny Vaughan, Robin, because we used to do impressions of his presenting style. And I think he started on that show Movie Watch or something like that. I remember him on first, and then he became pretty big in the UK, right? I think after I left, I think he was fairly famous in the Johnny Vaughan, right?
Yeah, well, for Big Breakfast.
That's right. That's what he was on. I was trying to figure out what his big break was. Yes, he was on Big Breakfast.
But then
So
after
we're talking
that,
like Cannon and Ball famous? Like what level of fame are we talking here?
Well, fairly famous. I mean, famous enough that he'd be on panel shows, I guess, that people knew who he was, right? And not particularly funny, but he was a guest on this TV Heaven, Telly Hell show. And one of his picks for his TV Heaven things that he liked was this documentary, The Outcast. And fair play, that's when I learnt about this documentary. And he talked a good game on there with Sean Locke as well. It was one of the only times I've actually thought that Johnny Vaughan was funny, talking about this doc. So that's how I came across The Outcasts in the first place. Yeah, so this is about the East Anglia Motorcycle Club, The Outcasts, with their stormtrooper helmets and Born to Die.
Yeah, and their leader looks like Bill Bailey, kind of.
Well, they all look like Bill Bailey, kind of.
Yeah, I guess so.
No offense to Bill Bailey.
No, and yeah, so yeah, it's just yeah, again, fly in the wall documentary. Although I feel there's probably a lot more kind of set up scenes in this doc.
Yeah, and a strange soundtrack. Like
yes,
very weird. Like pushes you right out. Like what are they doing? What is with these noises?
It was a horror soundtrack, wasn't it, from an 80s horror soundtrack? Really?
Is that
yeah? Especially when they're like descending
really
into some kind of, I don't even know what they're doing. They're going down into some kind of cave or catacombs or something.
With torches, yeah. That was
yeah, they didn't. The other nice thing about this, they didn't. It was similar to somewhere in the estate. I think the connection would be that they're very similarly told in that they just, you know, he's wearing Nazi insignias all over him, and you don't bother ask him why.
Yeah.
Why.
Also, did you notice the badge on his cap that just says "fuck off"?
Yeah, the little one, the little strip, like.
It's a peculiar form of rebellion, isn't it? This I quite like these because yeah, it's for a start. There's I don't know. I think over the years from growing up watching too much American television and movies, I think you expect like bikers on Harleys and stuff to sound a certain way, and that way isn't sounding like they come from East Anglia, right? That's a weird.
I
kept imagining Hunter S. Thompson embedding himself with these guys.
Yeah.
to write a book.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they were because there was I watched it with my partner, and she pointed out that there was quite a lot of bureaucracy involved in in that club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Point of order, Steve. I think you'll find now, last week on the minutes, if you look at them,
Right.
we talked about stabbing last week, and I really wanted to get on to carburetors this week, and I'm really actually getting.
There's something about it as well, which is very like they're really desperate to cut loose and like be hedonistic, but it's always slightly brought. There's like they go down to the beach and like one of their mamas like drinking beer out of his belly button. And it's just whenever like the British try and do this kind of thing, it always doesn't.
It's got wonderful tragic comedy to it.
Yeah.
Like my favorite bit of that was what was he saying? Did I write it down? I can't remember. I don't think I wrote it down, but it was something like there was it doesn't matter. Anyway, there was something, while we, if someone comes over here, we stab them, blah, like a voiceover.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's staring at a river, and then and he just looks. It's just a guy in a biker gear who looks very, very, very bored. I see a boring fucking river. So he decides to crush a can and throw it into the river.
Great.
That's better.
You're right. He's talking about something else entirely unrelated, and all of a sudden, and just chucks it in the river. And then, fuck you, river.
I don't want to do the London accent.
I know.
Or I
can't do any extent. Even though, Robin, I have to admit, I found your profile. I laughed my ass off. I found your profile page at a talent agency online.
Oh, right. Okay.
And the bit that made me laugh is that it said, very adept at doing lots of different accents. And having done day release for a so now,
that's really true.
Yes, you're so versatile. So, sorry, Nick, but if you end up watching some of our shows, you'll find that many accents get used.
Oh, nice.
Very.
The good thing is why I like, despite the Nazi memorabilia, I have a strong affinity with the people from Norwich and places like that, because I don't know if you've ever been there. Have you been there?
No.
Well, I went there a couple of years ago, and then Mark Steele, the comedian, did a thing on Ipswich or Norwich or whatever. Anyway, it's really weird because you can do a Norwich accent because it doesn't fucking matter, because every accent is there. I went to see the seals, and the people who on the boats took us to the seals are all speaking in Devonian accents. There's a strange thing. A lot of people speak like, where are you doing? And they're in Norwich, and it is nowhere near. And there's a huge gap between Norwich and Cornwall, but
right.
they sound the same.
Alan Partridge country as well, isn't it?
Yeah, Alan, right. You've got your kind of, that one, the nasal one as well. Really, I think we should be talking about something. But you got every accent there. It's really weird.
Also, the other thing as well, which I thought was interesting. So again, the kind of you expect, these bikers, they're gonna finance their hard rocking lifestyle by selling drugs or weapons.
Yes,
but no,
yes.
They have a burger van.
The burger van. Yes, I quite like that.
And an undertaker.
Yes, and the undertaker, who's
because it ends. There's a biker funeral, right?
Yes.
Which I'd really like to know who the band.
Me too.
I want to know who the band playing the funeral.
It reminded me of stunt rock. Do you remember?
Right.
And there was that band who did a lot of magic bullshit as part of their stage act that appears in stunt rock. Anyway. And
I still don't understand what. So there's a lot of stuff in this film which is like, I don't quite understand what happened. So he's explaining. So we're at a biker funeral, and it turns out the guy who's at the funeral got killed at another funeral, right?
But or some kind of big party.
And he was missing his head. but they don't
Yeah.
quite explain how he
It
lost
sounded
his
like
head.
a big hunk of wood fell out of the fire and smashed
Something
him
like
across
that.
the head.
You know
They
what I
did,
mean?
but it was very, very difficult to picture because they were throwing wood onto the fire, and they said, "Well, the wood." It was the Undertaker guy explained it, didn't he? The wood sprang up, and then a huge bit knocked his head, well, the top of his head clean off or whatever.
Yeah,
It was.
I had a hard time
There's another
imagining
bit,
It was
that
very
sequence
hard
of
to
events.
there's another bit I quite like as well, where one of the biker mamas is like posing naked
Yes.
on a bike with a helmet, and
Mm.
decide at one point, sexily, I guess, like
Yeah.
just smears a bit of grease on
Spike
the outside.
grease on her leg. Yeah.
And it's like, ugh. There's someone getting hard, I guess, at that, I suppose.
But it's fine. I kept like it. It felt like at any moment, like Aid Edmondson was going to appear, and this would be a comic strip presents. Like it had all the feeling of like Bad News or one of those kind of like
Right.
Like it was just so close to being a parody, and I just felt like, did these guys know how they were going to come off? Like, because it seems like a very wrong-headed approach if you wanted to make yourself seem like really hard, was to make this one where they go to the mum's house and she basically tells you like, oh, it's all bullshit. Like he's just he's a softie.
Bobby's mum is like the most level-headed person.
Down to earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything was like a kind of almost either knowingly done like a parody or something. Like was it the first bit, or the guy with the is that Bobby, the guy with the chrome
I think so.
I think so, yeah.
And he drives up up to the camera and they go, well, the the thing about being in a biker gang was
it was a Python-esque
everything had that kind of air of just
almost parody, but not.
I think the part where the doc really takes off into what the fuck territory is when we go to their local club house, right? Where, as well as I guess drinking and eating crisps, there's a weightlifter.
Yes.
And a man practicing martial arts.
Yes.
Some other dudes like pushing like sticks into his neck muscles until they bend and break.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, so it's like a Shaolin monastery pub or something that they hang out. That bit, and there's a bit as well where he's rolling around on the floor. He comes up
monkey mantis style or something. But maybe that's the connective tissue to Tony, actually, now that I think about this. These guys probably had a pretty good VHS collection going of dodgy, low-budget action films.
Well, I thought it was going somewhere, but it where it was going was actually explaining all the way. The narrative thread was the death, but I thought it was built at that point. At least I thought it was building up to a big fight or something. They seem to be talking like,
and the big
about
crime,
fighting.
the big crime in the whole thing that they're all going into court over is like is basically taking 20 extra pounds of
that scene was very
money.
That scene was very said a lot to me actually, when they're just walking down the street and they look like really out of place and they're sharing a cigarette and they look really nervous, and you're thinking, these people aren't menaces to society at all. Look at them. They'll just leave them alone with their burger van and so unthreatening. Unless you're that guy. Who's the guy? There's one guy in the club.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Who's the club slave or something? Who? Yeah, we've set him on fire and we've thrown him off bridges. It's like, what's now? I'd like to have known more about that. That was quite interesting.
Because there was a thing about you. If you leave the club, they're going to scalp your whatever
your tattoo off. They'll flay you.
Then that guy who was talking about that was talking about needles or whatever, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was saying,
if I find someone doing drugs in someone's arm, I'll break the needle off in the arm. I'll kill it. We threw because that's what he was talking about, wasn't it? In order to prove that you're loyal to the club, they'll throw you in a fire or whatever.
Yes.
In order to get in the club, you've got to go through all this shit.
Initiation stuff, like
and
a
it
frat.
didn't seem like he seemed like either he's telling the truth and everyone else is a bit nervous about talking about it, or he's full of shit and they never do any of that. And he's the only one who goes, yeah, you want to watch out for our club. It's one of the most dangerous places you could ever hope to be. I had my arm sawn off. Why is your arm still there then? I stuck it back on there. You're full of shit. Either that or the other.
Yeah,
anyway,
I was looking forward as well to maybe some, because they mention it, but we never see. There's no rumbles with rival gangs, right?
No.
I can't imagine is there another motorcycle club in East Anglia, like the outside casts or something, or like the Norfolk Avengers or something.
The Norfolk fucks.
The Norfolkers.
There you go.
Or the Oxford. Don't fucking mess with us. Don, you look at me. You can. I like the guy's life hack. That was another comedy moment where it's like, oh yeah, you just put these. He holds up these rag of. You put these over when you're partying, and you just
why
waste a good pair of jeans?
Yeah. This sort of type called. But you think about there's huge holes in it. There's like
the dirt will go through because there's nothing there.
There's one peculiar bit as well that might have passed you and you might not have noticed. And the only reason I noticed it because when Johnny Vaughan was on TV Heaven Telly Hell, he specifically pointed out this bit and like pointed out how weird it was. There's like one very brief bit where there's one guy, he's talking about, he's got like a leather pouch, which he like reconstructed or something. And if you actually listen to what he says, he says something like, I found this leather pouch. It was in bits in a bin. I took it out and I went to the library and I rented a few books. And then I put it back in. It's like, what? What did you just put together this shitty leather pouch? It took 3 books from the library. What are you talking about? It's just a real strange non sequitur moment.
Yeah, I think I remember that bit. Yeah. They were like the Wombles, weren't they?
That's
in every way.
Non-threatening biker.
Tobermory would always go be the one.
Wimbledon, Wombledon.
You don't come down
to free
Wimbledon and expect to not get thrown in a fire. I tell you.
That band could have done a cover version at the funeral. That would be like a metal cover of the Wombles theme. So yeah, kind of fun this doc, huh?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well worth it.
Just ridiculous in all the right ways.
And also, if you do watch it online, it seems to be any version. If it's on Vimeo or YouTube or whatever, it seems to have been from the same recording. So you also it's part of the 40 minutes thread, but the video's 50 minutes. So you get some bowls as well, late night bowls from BBC Two, which is
right.
Nice and relaxing. It's I quite enjoyed watching old bowls commentary from the mid 80s.
It just takes you back to how basic everything was as well.
Yeah,
like you don't get kind of any. It's just two. And then you get some horrible noise. And then
there's no
later on today.
There's no ident with some cunt fucking dancing around with bed sheets and it's something. And then an ice sculpture comes out of the floor. No, it's just this is BBC and it's Bran.
Massive organ chord.
It's Bran. It's one of the logo. Bran. Next on BBC Two, something Bran.
This is what you get. You don't like it? Go to BBC One.
Yeah.
You probably won't like that either.
And it's all going to finish at 11. Now fuck off to bed.
Yeah.
I would say, so the other thing I noticed quite near the beginning was it reminded me, of like the first Mad Max film. There's this weird, strong homosocial element to the toe cutter and his gang. And the part where they go to the beach and they're all suddenly blowing smoke into each other's mouths from like, which in COVID times seems very wrong. But I was like, wow, these guys are not shy about showing their manly affection for each other.
Yeah. To be honest, this was something I never understood, because I remember this happening to me a few times when you'd be...
you went to the beach with bikers and they blew smoke in your mouth?
Well, me and Robin used to go to the beach a lot and smoke. Okay. But we did.
It was a thing when you smoked weed, was it?
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. Was every now and again.
Not that I ever did.
Yeah, we never did this, but there was a weird thing. Sometimes you'd be at a party or something, and someone would say, "Do you want blowback?"
Yeah.
And so it's when you put the cherry of the spliff in your mouth, and then the person smokes like that. It's true.
It seems like a gateway, but not to drugs.
No, it's weird. It's a strange thing. People every now and again, I've only ever done it like 2 or 3 times. So people would jump blowback, and you'd go like, yeah, and then you'd do it, and then you'd realize, what was the benefit of that? I don't understand what that.
I think they missed a trick with Tony. They should have had him
doing blowback.
Like trying to get people doing blowback.
Yeah. There's a scene in Peep Show.
I can do that. I don't know how to smoke the normal way, but I can do the blow.
There's a scene in Peep Show, I think, where a girl who fancies David Mitchell's character, like, do you want blowback? And he totally doesn't understand. And he's like, what, like, here? In the bathroom? Yeah. But no, it is one of those weird things. Like, when they were doing that, it did take me back a little bit. I still don't know what
I had never seen it before. That was a new thing for me.
I don't know what the benefits are. Yeah.
They're so pedestrian. Well, I mean, it's not the right word, but all of them. You got the feeling like the women that were with them, were bored out of their minds because they're so bored. Yeah, they're so bored. Like the whole way through, they're just really, really bored and quite boring themselves in a way, and that's what makes it so wonderful. It's just,
yeah, it is pedestrian kind of version of the biker lifestyle, a very sedate English countryside,
Yeah, and it kind of made me think of like what was it about? Because they almost, like, by virtue of existing and watching it, they strip Dennis Hopper and what's the
Peter Fonda.
They strip that film of its glamour in some way.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
It's kind of like they transpose themselves onto that film, in my mind, at least, and kind of
completely
demystify it, like.
All the romance,
because a lot of that film is kind of suffused with drugs, and there's a lot of music. I can't remember hardly any of the dialogue or not, but then I think they kind of, in my mind, all of the dialogue that's in OUTCASTS goes. You could almost overdub it. In fact, it would be a really fun project.
We should make that movie. We should just
every time Dennis Hopper
driving down the road in a burger van to Steppenwolf.
Yeah, so we've got this burger van. I can imagine it. Anyway.
Awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, yes. So there we go. Summer on the Estate, Tony, the Outcasts,
and Return to Summer on the Estate. Don't forget.
Yes.
And Estate a Reverie. Watch that too.
Yeah, there we go.
As a thing after all of that,
and then go watch some bowls. To relax at the end of the night.
Some sheepdog trials.
The only thing potentially better is maybe a spot of stumbling home from the pub drunk is a spot of Open University. That was always quite a nice way to round the evening out.
That's how I learned the facts of life. was left home alone with a television at the age of 7 or 6. I was sick from school, stayed home. Mum put on the Open University channel.
I thought it was going somewhere else there. And then
yes, you're not going to believe this story, gentlemen. The stuff that goes on in countryside Ireland is no.
And, a sexy babysitter or something.
Sadly, no. Went to my mom and said, I just saw this on the television. Is this? And my mom was good that way. She was like, yep, no, that's how it works. Don't tell anyone you know. Don't tell your friends. So yeah, important educational service provided by the
Open University. Yeah,
the Open University channel. Yep.
Well, as I said, I got learned the facts of life from the old Tin Pot Foreign General and the.
Oh yes, yes. Not from that time
lady.
Not from the time you quickly biked past the estate.
Oh yeah.
That was a good actually.
Brief glimpse. That was
going up to Dublin as a kid. You would see people humping on church doorsteps and stuff in the middle of the night, and that was the other way. But that was
one quick question actually. I just occurred to me, Robin. George Rousseau isn't the same. He's not the same George, your friend, is he? From when you were a kid.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I said it was him that I think we rode through the estate.
Ah, right. So would this be, because this is you once regaled an anecdote to me. Is this the George that while you were watching television, he took his trousers off and danced in front of the screen and showed you his bum for some weird reason? Is this the same George, and do we want to keep this in the podcast?
I'm not sure he would want you to feel that in. I think he did the old what's his name? It should be a name, the old Arthur Brown he did, where you tuck your dick between your legs. Fire.
Also, that is Mickle. Is it Mickle? No.
Yeah.
Mackie.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Mackie.
Oh, right.
So
There we go.
I had forgotten that story. Thank you for bringing that back to me.
That's all right.
I'd forgotten it.
Might as well keep it in as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's obviously a man who knew he wanted to entertain from a young age.
Yeah. And he's gone leaps and bounds from there. Okay then. So until next time, I've been
with his penis between his legs the whole time.
I've been Clive Davis, and they have been
Robin. See ya.
And Nick.
Bye.